Welcome to my presentation on the famous World War II. While many events occurred during the gruesome time period, the most important figure that came out of this war was Hitler. My video will be covering some major events during the war, but the main focus will be on Hitler. Firstly, it is important to note events that led up to this war. Because of the Treaty of Versailles, heavy demands came flooding in for Germany after the First World War, and democracy started to fail. Inflations of products went up insanely fast and crippled their economy greatly. Hitler slowly took power due to two reasons. One, the effects of the inflation hit Germany really hard, and they thought that the current party would only make it worse. Two, there was a political stalemate, and eventually, due to a fire in the city hall, it led to fascism being the victor. Therefore, Germany chose Nazi Party, German Socialist Workers' Party, to be their leader. Several events occurred during the 1932 to 1934, and eventually Hitler became the leader and chancellor of Germany. He came into full power by passing this Enabling Act, which gave him complete power over his people. With this, he began to appease the world to gain his needs, such as remilitarizing his army and annexation of other countries. He took appeasement too far in one event, and he promised not to invade Czechoslovakia for Sutherland, but they did it anyways. Due to the trust being lost, they decided that war was the only option. World War II officially started on September 1st, 1939.
Back in Canada's side, Canada was busy preparing to join World War II, siding with the Allies. However, this time they chose to join independently rather than following Britain's footsteps. Canada played a big role in supporting the Allies to achieve victory. Having Canada just come out of the Depression and World War I, the idea of joining another war was absurd. However, Canada decided to join the war and started putting up propaganda posters for enlistment to the army. Although they had a shaky start, eventually the poster played a big role in propagating the message and resulted in much recruitment to the army. Conscription was used to attain soldiers too. In 1940, the Prime Minister, King, implemented the National Resource Mobilization Act, which required all men to help with war efforts but not overseas. 2 years later, he held a plebiscite to break his promise and send men overseas. French and English connections were strained during this period of time, but it was not as severe as it was in World War I. As for the economy, the Wars Measure Act was brought upon the Canadians again, and all efforts went into the war. This time, however, women started to work what we call the man's job, and this resulted a step forward into anti-sexism. Women involvement didn't stop here. They helped as teachers and nurses overseas and supported the troops greatly. Canada was a pretty expendable force compared to the bigger forces. However, they supported the Allies greatly. For example, during the Battle of Atlantic, Canada provided British Navy with corvettes, which are small warships. Also, Canada helped reclaim Normandy during D-Day, which is imprinted in Canadian history as one of the most memorable and autonomous events that has ever occurred. Although the Canadians helped a lot, we cannot neglect the fact that the Japanese internment occurred during this time period. Having Japan on the Axis side, Canada started gathering Canadians from Japanese descent and sent them into internment camps. They were stripped away from their human rights and worked like slaves. A total of 22,000 Japanese Canadians were sent to these camps. Canadians partook in the Holocaust also. Although indirectly, they had many refugee policies during the time, and there was an apparent spread of anti-Semitism during the time in Canada. In addition, one incident occurred where the ocean liner MS St. Louis arrived in Canada with 937 Jews asking to be admitted, only to be sent back to Germany and into concentration camps. In fact, Canada was one of the lowest countries in the amount of Jews taken in during the time, only taking in 5,000 Jewish people, compared to ones like Bulgaria, which helped more than 48,000 Jewish people.
War from the world's perspective was quite different. At first, the Allies were having a rough time starting with the invasion of Poland, which Germany took over easily. Then came the Phony War, which was a time period where nobody did anything due to bad weather conditions. After that, the disaster, what we call Dieppe, in 1942 came, where in a few hours more than 3,800 Canadian soldiers were dead, wounded, or taken prisoner. Learning from this, they planned out D-Day, aka Operation Overlord, in June 1944. It was a war which lasted until April of 1945. This was not the end of the war though. During the same time period, the Americans were still going at it with Japan. The war finally ended with America deciding to drop 2 nukes in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. After this, the celebration was short-lived as people started to discover the Holocaust. Hitler was obsessed with wiping the Jewish people off Earth and ordered his men to commit mass genocide. Many died from starvation, and some died due to inhumane experiments, such as being operated on without painkillers to test how it would affect their shock system. The most deadly way, however, was the gas chamber. Cyclone B gas, aka hydrogen cyanide, was used to massively reduce the number of Jewish people. That concludes my presentation on World War II.